Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm still here after all these years, after all these tears I shed. I'm still here and I'm walking this earth like I should be. There was days that I didn't know if I would be. Yeah, yeah. Now I stand tall with my feet in the ground and my head in the clouds. 'Cause I'm still here like I should be. Yeah, yeah, like I knew that I could be. Here we go, here we go. I'm still here. I'm here.
Welcome back, everyone. We are doing a summer Sensational Survivor series, and I'm not a huge fan of the word survivor, but I do like alliteration, so I had to throw it in. And I think people do understand what that word means. But today I have a guest with me, and I'm going to have her introduce herself, and we're going to get going. So please
Hi,
start.
everyone. Hi, I'm Fink, and I'm so excited to be sharing my story with you guys today.
Yeah, and Leecy and I were talking a little bit beforehand, and we do have a few similarities in our story, so that's fun. But can you just start by telling people about your diagnosis and how long you've been at this?
Of course, so I was diagnosed with stage 3C triple negative breast cancer in January of 2013. Had to think about this the other day, but I believe I was 30, 38 at that point.
Okay.
So 38 years old, and immediately, of course, went into chemotherapy and turned 39 soon after that diagnosis.
Okay.
And after doing TAC, which is those in the breast cancer world know is Taxotere, Adriamycin, Cytoxan, six of those, and then having a double mastectomy and followed by 33 radiation treatments. I finished up my reconstruction and 3 months, almost 4 months later, I suffered a massive seizure. And
Okay.
in April of 2014, I had my first craniotomy for a brain tumor. So at that point, I had become metastatic. And so I was stage 4 just a couple of days after my 40th birthday.
Okay.
So that was 2014.
Okay.
And so I'm still here.
You are
I'll be
still
happy to
here.
share. I'll be happy to share as many details in between as you want to hear.
Yeah, so did the seizure come as a complete surprise?
It was a complete
Okay.
surprise. I was in survivor mode. I know you talked about
Mm-hmm.
survivor earlier,
Mm.
but I had rang the bell and I was
Ah,
wearing my pink and celebrating. I had joined a board for a breast cancer nonprofit. I was raising money for breast cancer. I was leading a support group. I was doing all the things to move on with my life, but also starting to give back. And so I had gone back to work. I was actually in Dallas. I live in Virginia, but I was in Dallas at the market center and I used to own a bridal shop. And so I was shopping for wedding gowns at the market center in Dallas with business colleagues. I was not with my family. No one was there from
oh,
even
wow.
from my hometown. And I went into a showroom and I was looking at wedding gowns. And the next thing I know, I was waking up and they were trying to figure out, does she know who I am? What just happened?
Wow.
And the sales rep that was there caught me as I fell, and I was obviously transported to the hospital. And I was already Googling as soon as I became aware of what was going on. I was already Googling brain tumor, triple negative breast cancer,
Okay.
and what that meant. And I followed up with a CT and MRI there. And my husband flew down the next day. We flew back. That was on a Sunday night. And by Friday, I was having my first brain surgery.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, so stage 4 since 2004, April of
Okay,
2014.
so how did that change in terms of treatment? Did they?
So I had the
Mhm.
craniotomy, and then at that point, I was referred to a larger cancer center. I was getting treatment locally, so I was referred to a larger cancer center for my radiation. And the larger cancer center actually recommended at that point whole brain
Okay.
radiation. And my local radiation oncologist who had done my breast radiation had referred me there because this facility really was focused in on brain tumors and metastatic brain tumors. And she was shocked. She did not expect them to say whole brain. And on my drive back, I told her, I said, I'm ready to start whole brain radiation next week. This is the
Yeah.
plan. Thank you. It was actually a clinical trial, and I'm not sure what the trial was. I don't know if it was the number of
Yeah.
treatments or what it was, but so I was offered this opportunity to be in a clinical trial. And my local radiation oncologist was like, whoa, hold on. We might need that, but let's rethink this a little
Okay.
bit. And so I trusted her and decided to take a different path. And at that point, she opted and suggested one large treatment of SRS or stereotactic radiation therapy.
Okay.
And so I had one treatment of that. And then I started at that point on carboplatin and Gemzar, which was the standard of care at that point for triple negative
Okay.
BRCA1
Mm-hmm.
breast cancer.
Okay.
And so I was very sick at this
Yeah.
point. I became septic soon after my radiation. My incision from my original mastectomy on my cancer side had opened up, and I had cellulitis and eventually became septic. I was very
Yeah.
sick, and before I even started chemotherapy, I was really sick.
Okay.
And in June of that year, just a couple months after my radiation, I did eventually start chemotherapy, started carbogemzar. I was treated before PARP inhibitors, before immunotherapy. So I remember my oncologist at the time, who I loved dearly, who's since retired, who I still get to eat breakfast with every 6 or 8 weeks
Oh,
or
that's
so.
awesome.
And I remember him putting his hand on my knee, just saying, hold on, there's good stuff
Coming.
coming.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to live to see that.
Mm.
And he said, immunotherapy is about a year away. He said, I just hang on.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, there's no
Mm.
way. I just don't see that being in my future, but I'm going to fight, obviously, as hard as I
Yeah.
can. And so I started on Carbo and Gemzar. And in September, just 5 months later, they suspected, and of course, I was getting regular
Yeah.
scans at that point, and they suspected that my brain tumor was growing again. Fortunately, in my second craniotomy, it was determined to just be necrosis and
Okay.
some scar
Yeah.
tissue. But another brain surgery set me back a little. I couldn't take chemo for a while.
A little. I love how we can just
So
like talk about things as if they're no big deal.
I know. So I actually talked to someone a while back and I
Yeah.
forgot that I had a second brain
Yeah.
surgery. And
Wow.
I, it's just kind of, I know,
Yeah.
just another brain surgery.
Yeah.
So, or you just, I say craniotomy like it's, and actually, I saw my current oncologist yesterday and we were talking about my brain MRI. And he said, and he was saying he wanted to wait for the actual radiologist report to come back. He goes, I can
Okay.
see the hole. And then he stepped back. He's like, I'm sorry. I go, no, it's true. There is a big hole there. I can feel it.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
said, every time I go to a different hairstylist, they're like, should I
Yeah.
rub right there? I'm like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
Just a couple craniotomies and some radiation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I stayed on Carbo Gemzar until November of that year. And then I had progression. And the progression came in the form of some lung tumors. I remember the radiologist's words were, there's just too many tumors to count. So they were numerous. So I was
Mm-hmm.
full of lung tumors. I also had a large tumor next to where my port was. I had, of course, we've all seen the lymph nodes light up from here to here. So I was full of cancer at that point in my midsection. And of course, I was still worried about my brain. And I was
Sure.
very worried about my liver, but at that point, there was no liver involvement, fortunately. And so we switched at that point to carboplatin and Abraxane. We dropped the Gemzar and we started on carboabraxane. And I took my family on a cruise that Christmas. And in my mind, I called it my goodbye cruise.
Oh my goodness.
I fully expected that to be my last Christmas with my family. I knew what the progression meant. And
Mm-hmm.
I had looked at the statistics for metastatic brain tumors, and mine was Lyme size, right or left frontal lobe. It was not in a
Mm-hmm.
good place either. None of them are in a good place.
Yeah.
And I was very sick. When I say that I'm septic in the beginning, but there were several more times during this
Yeah.
next 2 years that I was in and out of the hospital.
Yeah.
Constant urinary tract infections. I continued to have problems with my incision and had to have my implant replaced to a smaller implant. So that was another
Mm-hmm.
surgery. I had my ovaries out the year before. So that's just lots of
Yeah.
surgeries, lots of hospital stays. I think that story is pretty common among metastatic patients.
Yeah.
And after my goodbye cruise that Christmas, I continued on carboplatin and Abraxane. And in February, I had scans and they looked a little better. Not
Okay.
the cancer wasn't gone by any means, but the tumors in my lungs were shrinking. And so the carboplatin and Abraxane was working.
Okay.
And at that point, I was taking those treatments 3 out of 4 weeks a month. I
Okay.
would take treatment on Monday and I'd go back on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for fluids, for magnesium, for potassium, for infusion, any kind of infusion
Yeah.
I needed just to keep
Yeah.
on treatment.
Yeah.
And I would take anything they offered.
Yeah.
I couldn't take Neulasta shots anymore because I was taking treatment too often. So I was getting Neupogen shots those
Yeah.
days as well. And I was
I
in the
did
bed.
Neupogen.
Yeah,
Neupogen.
Neupogen's
Well,
pre-Neulasta for you, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in the bed all the time. It
Hmm.
was rare. I would feel like, oh my gosh, this is the day we can go somewhere. And of course, I had had the seizure, so I wasn't able to drive. So I would have my aunt or my husband or somewhere take me to Target, and I'd get so excited to get to Target. And then by the time we got there, I was like, I got to go back home.
Yeah. Makes
And
sense.
it was disheartening and hard. I remember my oldest daughter coming home and she said, aren't we going to order my class ring? And I
Mm.
said, didn't we already pick it out online? And she goes, yeah, but I want to go try them on. And my aunt was here at the time and I was so sick that day. And I said, honey, I don't know if I can do it. She's about, Mom, it's my class ring. And my aunt said, I'll take you. And I was like, okay. So we got to the high school and there was a long line of people waiting to try on class rings. And we were in the cafeteria and I just put my head down on the cafeteria table and I slept until she came and got me.
Oh.
And that was one of those moments. And I had a lot of those moments where I was just saying, I just have to power through because my kids need me.
Yeah.
And even on my worst days, I would try to sit up in bed and have them watch TV with me because my philosophy was I'd rather be so sick and in bed than not here at all.
Yeah.
And so there was no letting up unless I was forced to by my counts or hospital
Yeah.
stays or surgeries or whatever. I just kept taking it. And honestly, I would still be taking it today if I could. If I thought it would make a difference, I would be saying put the port back in. I
Wow.
actually asked my doctor about Keytruda yesterday and said,
Okay.
have you ever given it to anybody farther out? There's so much great data on it. And he's no, and you're not getting more of anything right now. I was like,
Okay.
okay,
Yeah.
good call. But I think all of us get in that mindset that we just want to do whatever it takes to live. So my scans looked a little better that February, and I stayed on treatment. And in June, I was getting scanned probably every 2 or 3 months at that point,
Yeah.
and dealing with pneumonia and lots of other things related to it just being on treatment. And in June of that year, I was scanned, and that's 10 years ago this month. And I was no evidence of active disease at that point.
Wow.
I remember I used to
Wow.
pick up copies of my scans
Yeah.
hours before they would release them. I would sign a waiver and get the preliminary report and pick it up like 2 hours after my scans. It's a little different now, everything's online.
Yeah.
But I remember going straight from the hospital to my cancer center and walking back to the nurse's station and just almost collapsing in the nurse's arms, crying. And she was like, oh my gosh, how bad is it? And I was like, I think it's good. And she took me into a room because I was just so distraught and
Yeah.
like dry heaving, crying. And all these other patients are looking at
Yeah.
me
That's
thinking,
not
oh my
great for other
gosh, this is
patients to
really bad.
see.
And this looks terrible. This is not the
Yeah.
place for this.
Yeah.
So she took me into a room that I'd gotten in chemo in hundreds of times at that point. And my oncologist came in and he had already read the scans as well. And it was unreal. I never, ever thought that I would get to that point, and I definitely didn't assume I would stay there. I continued taking treatment after that for another 10 months.
Okay.
And in December of that year, I stopped taking carboplatin because my platelets just weren't recovering enough to stay on treatment. So he pulled the carboplatin back and stayed on the Abraxane until April of 2016.
Okay.
And then I got really sick and my lungs looked terrible on the x-ray, terrible on the CT, and we fully thought the cancer was back. And looked like my cancer had looked 2 years prior in my lungs.
Okay.
And they called in a pulmonologist and he did a bronchoscopy. And when the result, he said, I know this pulmonologist quite well. And he came in and he said, I just don't think it's cancer.
Yeah.
And I was like, what else could it be? I have stage 4 cancer. How could it not be
Mhm.
cancer? And it was okay because I was just waiting for it to come back at that time.
Okay.
So I got the results. I was still in the hospital, still pretty sick on oxygen and trying to come back from this. And they were treating me with antibiotics and
Yeah.
everything else. And he started me on an antifungal at that point because he was convinced it might be fungal. And so when the bronchoscopy results came back, I did have a really bad fungal thing going on in my lungs as well as MRSA. And
Oh,
the fungal infection was from the toxicity of being on Abraxane for so long. And
okay.
this drug that had saved my life, I could no longer take.
Yeah.
And so I stopped taking Abraxane, and every day I just thought the cancer was growing, and it was just a matter
Mm.
of time before it reared its ugly head again. And I had learned, and my oncologist had explained to me that in metastatic patients, our cancer just gets smarter, gets easier to, harder to treat, and easier to find new places to rear its ugly head, is what I always thought. And so I just kept waiting to find out where it was going to show up next. And scans a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later turned into a year. And this month, 10 years. And so I'm actually waiting right now for my scans from yesterday to come back. And so
Do you
if
still wait in the same way, or have you gained some confidence in?
I definitely gained confidence, but this particular month, and I think it's the whole 10-year thing, and just I've really been, my New Year's commitment this year was to start sharing my story more.
Okay.
And there's been so much survivor guilt, and I know everyone says that, but there's been a lot of guilt that I've carried, and just how unfair it is that other people haven't survived. I just really struggle with that as I've lost
Right.
so many friends. And I do have so many early stage friends that I often don't want to share my story with them because I don't want my story to be their story, not
Yeah.
the beginning of my story anyway. So I really struggle with where I fit into the cancer world
Yeah.
as an outlier. And I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that I am in this place, so grateful that but I've also held back a little bit.
Yeah.
And so my commitment this year was, after I joined this little cancer club last year, after I attended a funeral for a friend we had in common. She was in this cancer support group, and I still have
Mhm.
my cancer support group that I started when I was initially diagnosed. It's an online group, and I still share my story in the stage 4 groups on social media, just a quick blurb. And if somebody
Mhm.
messages me, I'm
Yeah.
happy to share anything with them. And but when my our friend passed away in December, and she passed away from colon cancer, and her kids had gone to school with my kids, and I met some of her friends. I knew a few of them, but I met them at the funeral, and they're like, "You should join us." And so some of them are early stage, some are stage 4, and they all said, "You need to share. Like, we need your hope, and other people need to hear hope too." And that just really hit me, that it's okay to share with people regardless of where they are in their battle. And so I have committed in 2025. I'm sharing my story. Anybody who asks, I'm going to share it. I'm going to shout it
Okay.
from the rooftops if people will
Yeah.
listen. And if they don't, I'm still going to shout it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting about that, and even me remembering back to being 10 years out or whatever that is, there's this whole worry about being like, what if it comes back? Or what if it this? All of these things. And it's just, it does, I think, hold people back from sharing because you don't want to put something out there and then have it change or not be true or any of those things. It does get better with time, I will say. I
Always,
had,
my story's not your story.
right.
It's they're all different,
Yeah.
but when someone introduced me to you and your story, I was like, yes, 26 years.
Yeah.
And I have a few other long-term survivor friends, and they're actually ahead of me. And weirdly, two of them live within an hour of me,
Oh, cool.
and they're outliers. They're both HER2
Hmm.
survivors, and or thrivers, or whatever we call ourselves.
I like to
And
say living with cancer because I just am like, for me, I really want the emphasis to be on living And of course, cancer is a big part of my life, but also it's not. So when we're
I
diagnosed, it's all about making the memories and being with our families and the things that we really care about. Yeah.
and I used to, my Facebook group that I started when I was first diagnosed to share my story with friends. It was called Leecy's Breast Cancer Journey. How cheesy was
Hmm.
that? Then I changed it after a few years to Leecy's Crazy Abundant Life with Breast Cancer. So I wanted the
Yeah.
cancer to still be part of my story,
Yep.
but I want people to see that a 51-year-old mom of five, grandma, Mimi of two, and a wife of 30 years who has this beautiful story of survivorship.
Yeah.
And also, I want my story to be about holding the hand of the next person, whether it's one person or 100 people. I want to hold their hands and help them through whatever they're going through, even if it's not cancer. You know,
Yeah.
everybody experiences really hard stuff,
Absolutely.
and someone else's hard stuff, whether it's a divorce or whatever, it's no different than my hard stuff. It's heavy on me today, like it was heavy on you yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. So, having cancer, how does that, we're talking a little bit about how it makes you move forward, but how has it impacted like your daily life and even choices you've made?
Everybody says treat every day like a gift, but I genuinely do. I have a picture above my bed that says, Morning by morning, new mercies I see. It's a verse from Ecclesiastes, and it's part of my favorite hymn from growing up. Great is thy
Mm-hmm.
faithfulness. And sorry, I just lost one
That's
of my
okay.
earbuds. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Should I grab it real quick?
Yeah, go
Is
ahead
it
and grab it.
okay?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it happens.
I have a really big head. Things fall out of my ears all the time. It was
That's
big
funny.
before my brain surgery, but I think it got bigger after that.
That's funny.
Can you still hear
Yep,
me
yep,
okay?
yep.
Okay, I'll go back to what I was saying.
Yeah,
Everybody has the feeling that every day is a gift, but I truly believe that every day is a gift for me. And I have one of those printed signs above my bed, and it says, Morning by morning, new mercies I see. And I genuinely believe that. It's found in Ecclesiastes, and it's also my favorite hymns that I had growing up, Great is thy faithfulness. And
yeah,
I had lived by that mantra when I was going through cancer. I thought, you know what, tomorrow's going to be a little bit better than today. And maybe
yeah,
tomorrow was just that I only threw up 3 times and I threw up
yeah,
4 times yesterday. Or
yeah,
maybe I actually made it to the living room tomorrow, the next
yeah,
day, where I never got out of my bedroom yesterday. But I was determined that I was going to find something that was a little bit better today than yesterday. And I try really hard to still live like that. I'm going to
yeah,
make today a little bit better than yesterday, whether it's for me or somebody else. And often that is for somebody else because my days
yeah.
are pretty good. I guess I can talk to you a little bit about like the things I still deal with related to,
Yeah.
you know.
And I just like one thing with those, I think when you have something as serious as cancer and you've been as sick as you have, I think there's also a realization when you wake up in the morning and feel good that you should embrace it. Because
Absolutely.
there's a lot of mornings you wake up and you didn't feel good or whatever. So at least for me, that's definitely something that I'm like, oh no, if I am like walking through the world today and feeling fine, then I know that I should embrace this.
Absolutely. Or even, I even appreciate a good night's sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You
I
know, I have
also,
a,
one other thing I did recently is I started a note in my phone and it's called One Good Thing. And so I just put
mhm,
the date and one good thing every day. And again,
I
it's
love,
like that gratitude type of thing, but it is what you're focusing on is what you're really making come to be. So it's interesting.
absolutely. I think it's mind over matter so often.
Yeah.
It's not to say
Yeah.
that the physical is not horrible because it is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I still remember how horrible. There are things that I forget, but
Yeah.
I took a friend for AC treatment a couple weeks ago. And as we were driving back from the cancer center, it's like an hour or so drive. And I could see it was her first AC, and I could see like the treatment start to affect her. And I could tell she
Yeah.
wasn't feeling well, and she wasn't quite sure why she wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
And I could see her get to a little clammy. And I haven't felt that kind of anxiety, or I don't, maybe it's PTSD. I don't know, but I haven't. First of all, when they were putting the red devil in her, I remember I was like, whoa, I don't think I've seen that. I've taken a lot of friends to chemo, but I've not
Yeah.
seen that injected since I had it injected, or if I have, I've
Yeah.
forgotten.
Yeah.
And I felt I had to get up and go to the restroom. Like I felt some anxiety there. And when I was driving her home, I could see her getting sicker as we got closer to our town. And I just went home that night and thought, thank you that I can go to sleep and rest because I knew she was going to be dealing with hot
Yeah.
flashes. I knew she was probably going to be sick all night. I knew she was going to struggle trying to find the right nausea meds. I knew that she was going to feel worse than she's ever felt in her life in the next few
Yeah.
days. And it's funny how that comes right back to you when you see it.
Yeah, you can just mention that and I can go, oh,
Yeah.
I had a
I just
reaction
basically describe
to
it
it.
as kind of yuck feeling.
Yeah.
And it's a level of yuck that you can't comprehend unless you've been on chemo.
Yeah. I actually had a reaction to adriamycin when I was
Oh,
getting it the very first time, and I didn't know. I'm 26 years old. I know nothing about cancer. We start with adriamycin, and when she starts to inject it, I just start to get flush, like the whole heat, all of this, and of
from your
course you
toes
get.
up, right?
Yeah, and the nurse was watching, of course, very carefully, and she's, oh no, this is a reaction. I was like, oh, I just thought this might be. Here
How
it
it's supposed
is.
to feel.
Yeah, craziness. So yeah, what does life look like now? What are some of the challenges, but also what are some of the good things that are going on?
When I was first diagnosed stage 4, my daughter had not graduated high school, my oldest. I have
Okay.
5 children, as I said earlier. And
So your kids were how old when you were diagnosed then?
I had two in diapers.
Okay.
I had two middle schoolers and a high schooler, and I'm really
Okay.
bad at remembering their
That's
ages even
fine.
today.
Yeah.
So,
That paints a pretty good
I'd
picture.
say a 2, 3, 14, 16, 18, something like
Yeah.
that. 13, 15, 17, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
They will tell you exactly what grade they were in.
Yes. Yeah.
But I definitely had two middle schoolers, a high schooler, and two little ones.
Wow.
Yeah, they were, I had all ages and all different challenges at that point.
Yes. All different ways
Um,
of processing it too, I would
mhm,
guess.
for
Yeah.
sure. And yeah, and I would own two businesses at the time and
Okay.
fully expected that I would take treatment and be back to work a couple days later and take a few weeks off and then take another treatment. And it just wasn't like that. And life for me right now is if I go really hard, like I'm going to go hard this weekend. I'm having a girls' weekend with my sister-in-law, and I can assure you that I'll be in bed on Monday
Okay.
just from spending the weekend at the lake. And as relaxing as that sounds, but just being in the sun and being
Yeah.
outside and being active, I still have days where I'm still in the bed a lot. But at the same time, I have really good days and a lot of them
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I have issues with my pancreas. That's related to damage done by chemotherapy. I take enzymes every time I eat, and I take a whole lot of medicine for stomach issues. And
Okay.
I won't go into detail on your
Yeah.
podcast, but and so I have a close relationship with a gastroenterologist, and I'm getting
Got
ready to
it.
see a pancreatic specialist based on something that was seen on my scan yesterday. But it's not suspected to be cancer, it's just related to what chemo does to you.
Mm-hmm.
I also take medicine every day for my bladder because chemo also did a number on my bladder.
Okay.
And I was diagnosed almost 2 years ago with dementia, and it was caused by the brain radiation and just the number of chemotherapies I took that crossed the blood-brain barrier, as well as the
Okay.
brain tumor. That was a major factor as well. And so I have a lot of memory issues, more than just chemo brain memory. And so yeah, but all in all, I'd say they're small potatoes.
I
That's my favorite thing
know.
to say. They're all small potatoes compared to the alternative, which is not being here. And I would rather be here all day with all those complications. I would
Yeah.
even be back on chemo. It would suck, but I would do it again in a heartbeat to be here with
Yeah.
my family.
Yeah. And ultimately, we can have as many diagnoses as possible, and some of them very hard to hear, but we can still live good days, like you're saying. It doesn't matter
Absolutely.
what's written in that chart. It's really about what's happening on the
And and
daily.
and having a genetic mutation also, I'm looking at my children and their possibilities of their futures. And so I won't share a lot about that publicly, but I'll just say that's obviously very heavy on our family as well.
Yeah. And that kind of thing is challenging because there's so many I don't know what the right way is for any of that. Do you know? Do you not know? Do you find out? Do you, all of those kind of things? So,
It's hard. And with 5 children, there's 5 different thought processes,
yeah,
and you're trying to balance what to do when or how to respond when, or not pressuring them, but also
yes,
trying to figure out how to navigate those waters is really hard
yeah,
because
definitely.
they've lived with me, but they've also lived with my friends who have not had good outcomes.
Yeah,
And it's a lot to kind of
yes,
conquer.
yeah,
And I just am so grateful I'm here to help them conquer it, or to help them work their way
absolutely.
through it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I don't have the answer for that either from a
Yeah, me
either
neither.
cancer standpoint. My daughter's 27. She's been in a high risk clinic since 18. I don't have mutations that they've found or labeled at this point, but it is all a
Every time we
challenge.
think we know them all, there here comes
Yeah,
Leecy.
I've done the testing twice now, so in different years apart or
Mm.
whatever. But and I have a father who passed away of dementia that is a genetic type of thing, and so that's something my brothers and I have talked about in terms of, do we want to know, do we not want to? So I
Yeah. And my
it's
mom passed away from ovarian cancer before mutations were really identified. And I didn't have any and never anticipated that breast cancer was in my future. And I had no family history of breast cancer, but I also have a family that never really, we weren't in a position where healthcare was a priority when for my family, it just wasn't
yes,
affordable, and it wasn't, just access to care was very limited.
yes. Are there any, you talked a little bit about the verse that's above your bed. Are there any other like words or mantras or things that just carried you through difficult times that have brought you hope again and again?
Someone gave me this little book, which, by the way, I don't suggest just shipping books to someone when they're first diagnosed with cancer. I remember the stack of books I got at first. It was a ton about heaven and death and preparing for
Hmm.
heaven. And I believe I'm going to heaven, but I wasn't prepared in January of 2013 to go to heaven at 38 years old and with 5 children. So I wasn't
Right.
really looking for books about heaven at that point. But one of the
Yeah.
things that someone did give me was this little pocket book, and it had different quotes in it, and it was all about cancers. And I think it's specifically about breast cancer. But one of the quotes in there was from Olivia Newton-John, who we know has passed away from metastatic breast cancer. And she said, I don't know what my path is, but I'm just going to keep walking it.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I don't know if you've heard that before, but I didn't know what my path was. I didn't know what my path
Right.
was for that evening or the next day
Yeah.
or a year from then or 10 years. I
Yeah.
was just going to keep on walking it and keep on figuring it out with my physicians and my family and the amazing support system that I had. I was
Yeah.
just going to keep walking it. And tomorrow's a little better than today. Mantra as well as just keep
Hmm.
on walking were the two things that I lived by and that I still live by.
I love that. I think we always think that life is going to be like this. We've got it figured out and it's going to go a certain way, and it just doesn't. And Sheryl Sandberg had a quote, and it was actually about a career, but she's talking about it's not a ladder, it's a jungle gym. And like
Mm.
sometimes you go sideways, and sometimes you go back down, and sometimes you go up. But we should think of it more as steps in the right directions and sometimes steps backwards, but we still can rise. And I just was like, so true, because I think we put pressure on ourselves that we should do something a certain way, and then life comes at us. And
I think too, like I always thought you get married, you have kids, there's
right,
this very
right,
clear path for myself.
yeah,
And I was married young and I was raised in a very conservative environment in my town. Everyone got married when they were
yeah,
20, 21 years old. And I thought that there was a very clear path that my future
right,
would be. And what I learned even prior to cancer was that, and I say this to my kids all the time, no choice is a bad choice. You just
yeah,
make it and you
yeah,
trust that the outcome is what you hope it's going to be. And if it's not, then you make another choice. And I really thought my path was going in one very clear direction. And so many times things have knocked me off that route. I
hmm,
learned now that I'm just going to go with the flow. If it takes me this way today, then maybe I'll go back on the same route tomorrow. And you're right. Sometimes you get knocked off that jungle gym and
absolutely,
you,
yeah.
you get scraped up and you have to climb back up. I like that. I
Or
like
you
that a
want
lot.
to jump off it, right? This is
No
the other
kidding.
thing
No
from a
kidding.
career standpoint for me. It's no, I don't want to be on that jungle gym. I'll pick a different one.
Yeah,
Like,
I get that
so
completely.
yeah. Yeah. What do you want other women with metastatic cancer to know? What would you, about
I,
possibilities or about, yeah,
I think coming back to no choice is a bad choice. I have
yeah.
several friends who are metastatic who right now are in the place where one of them is considering stopping treatment. Another one is trying some alternative therapies. And another one is thinking about her diet. And there's so many things that are thrown at us, and social media does that very well. They were faced constantly. I'm sure as soon as I close my computer, I'll start getting ideas from social media because someone's listening. But a lot of people ask me, what did you eat?
Yes.
What did you do different? And I always come back to was a whole lot of chemotherapy. I followed the standard of care. I didn't qualify for any clinical trials at that point in treatment. I always say a whole lot of chemotherapy, a whole lot of Dr. Oldham, who was my amazing oncologist at the time, and a whole lot of
Hmm.
Jesus for me. Prayer and my faith really sustained me, and not necessarily in that order. But other people find something else that sustains them, and that is beautiful too. And so I think coming back to just you make the best choice you think for yourself at that time. And
Yeah.
there were choices I made along the way that I thought, gosh, I really wish I would have done it different, but it was the best choice I knew that day.
Yeah.
And I think so often people make you feel guilty about the choices that you make or the doctor that you went to see or how much you're spending on vitamins but it's what you think is the right thing for you right now. And you
And
just can't put
they're
that undue
adding,
pressure on yourself.
I was going to say, when they add that opinion to you, it also adds an element of guilt and of shame and of things that it's, no, I'm doing these things to empower myself, to build myself up. That's where I talk a lot about kind of building a bubble of, I don't need
Hmm.
your opinion. If you're not on board for me, for what I'm doing, then just
Yeah.
please leave that at the door
Yeah.
kind of
And
thing.
you want people on your team, but ultimately you are the person who has it's your
Yeah.
body.
It's
Um,
what feels right to you or what
mhm.
does empower you and what does help you move forward.
And so much of cancer is so out of your control.
Yes.
99% is
Yes.
out of your control. So that
Yes.
one little percent that you might be able to control, whether it's I'm going to decide what nausea medicine I take and when,
Yeah.
or I'm going to decide that I can't take chemo this week. I need to wait another week.
Yeah.
So if there's a little piece of it you can control, by golly, take control of it because we're women who controlled everything prior to
Yeah.
that diagnosis. So
Yeah.
suddenly, when everything is out of your control, you just want something to be able to put your thumb on and say, I've got this part of it, and it's my decision.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And do it from a thought process of
Mhm.
this is what feels right to me and not of I have to. I when people feel like they have to do things, it's also can be detrimental, right? Because then it's adding that whole other layer of guilt, of
And my husband
disempowerment.
he was incredibly supportive, and he still is with my decision making. I remember one night, it was really rough. Excuse me, I was very sick, and I just gotten out of the hospital and probably needed to go back.
Yeah.
And I remember rolling over and saying, honey, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And I said, when it comes time for me to not do this anymore, meaning stop
Yeah.
taking treatment, I'm going to need you to get on board with that. And I know it's going to be really hard, but I'm going to need
Hmm.
you to get on board with that. And I need you to support our kids through that. And I need you to make sure that you always tell our children that I did everything I could do.
Yeah.
And I say that to other people too, that I've lost a lot of friends. And
Yeah.
I lost a friend a couple years ago, and my girlfriend and I made promises to her about how things would be at the end. And to this day, I would say to anyone who knew her that she did everything she could.
Yeah.
And
But also she doesn't have to. Like
no,
that's
that's
the
right.
thing. Like we just there's been so much, I don't know, I've been engulfed in the whole talking about the language around cancer. And just this week, somebody passed away. They lost their battle with cancer. And so that puts the onus on the patient. They died of cancer. And that sucks. It just really, I want people to feel like, I don't know, just, it's
I
really,
maybe you say that the person's at peace,
yeah.
or I don't know. I don't know what I want them to say
Well,
about
this
me
is
afterwards.
interesting
But
actually too.
there's no good way to say it. She won. That's not really it's not
No,
really a
no, no,
win
no. But
even.
also,
Won her battle? I don't think she won either. She didn't win
no,
her.
no.
Just life
That's
ended.
exactly it. She died.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that sucks. But
It does. It
it's
absolutely sucks. But after you face your own mortality, you definitely look at things differently.
absolutely
And
totally agree with
um,
that. And
we,
I was
yeah,
just going to say, I think I make a point of talking about people who have died with people who love them because I
mm,
know that's what I would want. I want you
absolutely.
to talk about me. I don't want to be whispered about. And
Yeah,
that's,
and I sometimes might sound a little crazy, and you can put
mm.
this in there if you want or not. But I think if I ever did have a career again, I think I'd like to be a death doula. I feel like
I understand that completely.
people need people when things are at that point,
I
and it's
agree.
more than hospice.
Yeah.
It's someone that understands when that person can't fight anymore or doesn't want to
Well,
fight
and
anymore.
also that you get to do it your way, both
Mm,
for the person and the family. And again, having my father passed away like 13 years ago, and he was sick for a while. He had a dementia, and it just progressed for a long time. But at the end, it was my brothers and I, and we played a game of Monopoly with him. He used to beat us at Monopoly as children, like
I love it.
mercilessly. Like he had no mercy on us. We all cracked open a beer, we played Monopoly, and we beat him. And it was like the greatest memory. And
Whenever we have a good friend who passed away, and whenever we go out to dinner, our girls group, we always have a glass of Chardonnay on the table and we all drink out of it
yeah,
because she loved her cheap Chardonnay
yeah,
and she could afford expensive Chardonnay,
yeah.
but she loved her house Chardonnay. And I hate Chardonnay, but I take a
So,
sip of that
yeah,
Chardonnay every single time we go to dinner.
yeah,
And yeah, I think you have a totally different
yeah.
perspective whether where and you don't have to be an outlier to have that
No,
perspective. I think there's just
no.
something, like I said earlier, about facing your own mortality. We lost our house in a tornado a few years ago, and our family survived in the basement. Our whole house was gone, and
Wow.
it's something I handled it incredibly well. In fact, I thought there might be something wrong with me how well I did handle it,
Yeah,
but I think it's because I had already thought that I was going to lose my life at some point. But then
yeah,
the one part that was super hard for me was the possibility of losing my family.
uh-huh.
Obviously, that's another level.
Yeah,
But the other members of my family and other people in my neighborhood and other people that had lost their homes or who'd faced that horrible tragedy,
mm,
it was a different perspective because they'd
yeah,
never been so close to death before. I felt like I had been that close and come
yep,
back from it.
yep.
I don't know. It's definitely a different feeling.
It absolutely is.
And I
Yeah.
might be, I don't know, when I get my scans back this time, maybe I'll be facing it all over again. But I definitely feel like I have a different perspective because I have.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We have been at this for a while. Let's
Sorry.
finish up. No, that's fine. I love it. I'm happy to hear all of this. But so the name of the podcast is I'm Still Here. What would you want the world to know about what it means to say I'm still here?
So I helped with a YouTube series a few years ago on metastatic breast cancer, and we had different physicians come in. We had a lawyer come in and talk about final wishes. We had people come in and talk about diet, just all this whole series. And one of the physicians came in, there was an oncologist who I had gotten a second opinion from early on after my stage 4 diagnosis. And he did a double take when he saw me because he couldn't believe I was still there. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, I know what you're thinking. And he said, No, you
Mm-hmm.
don't. I said, Yes, I
Yes,
do.
I do.
I said, I
Yeah.
get it quite often, actually, when I run into people who are not on
Mm-hmm.
social media or who know me from
Mm-hmm.
other places, points in my life. And it's it's a crazy feeling. And I didn't expect to be here. I didn't expect to live through 2014 or 15 or 16 or 17. And because I'm still here, I want to share that hope. And I think that hope is such an easy word to say, but it's a hard word to grasp. And so many times in our life, our hope tank gets depleted.
Yeah.
And I just want my I'm still here story to be able to help fill that tank back up for some people who need hope.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. I feel like sometimes in our society we are very cautious about providing hope to people because we worry about false hope. And we've
Oh, so
talked a
true.
lot on here about how I just don't believe in false hope. Like, we do need hope to move forward in a variety of challenges, regardless of what the challenge is. We need to have hope. And providing hope or having hope is not setting somebody up for disappointment. It's
No, it's not
giving
putting
them,
unreal expectations out
no,
there. And that's what I
no,
want to make sure I,
right,
not
right,
everyone is going to be an
right,
outlier or a thriver
right.
or a survivor. Not everyone's going to be there, but everyone needs to hope to be there.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
being with us. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you sharing.
Thanks so much for watching and being a part of our community. It means the world to us. Our goal is always to help as many people as possible live well with cancer. You can help us by subscribing and sharing episodes when you hear of others that could benefit from it. We really appreciate your time spent with us and your commitment to offering hope and inspiration to others.